Firebox night. And we went to the corner shop to go and buy a firework. And me and my friend hadn't much money, bought all our coins. And we put them on the counter and said, what kind of a firework can we buy for this amount of money? And the person behind the counter went, that'll buy you one big firework. We're like, okay. So she went off and she got this kind of firework. She said, here you go, you can have this firework here. It's that money, so this firework. Wow, this big firework. Thank you so much. Went to a student party and we banged on the door and went to this party. I said, guys, I've got this massive firework. Do you want to watch us set it off? And everyone was like, yeah, for sure, it looks amazing. So about 50 students poured out of this kind of party, out of this little green. And I got a bottle and I put a firework in the bottle. There's a problem. This firework was so big that whenever it went in the bottle, it was so heavy, it kept knocking over the bottle. I thought, oh, what I'll do, I'll just kind of force it in the ground a bit. So I got the rocket and I kind of forced it into like that, facing upwards, always a good plan. So everyone stand back and I lit the fuse. And it went. There was a problem. I fixed it so securely in the ground that it wasn't going anywhere. It kept going. And then it exploded at ground level. And bits of firework shot over all of these students' heads. They were all like, wow! This is the best firework ever! I'm like, I almost killed you. That firework had all this potential energy to make a massive splash across the sky, and yet it failed to really take off. As local churches, I think we have God's Spirit at work in our churches. There's so much potential for each and every local church. But this whole sharing Jesus kind of training stuff we're doing, this Emmaus journey, you're really looking at two aspects that I think are helpful in understanding how can we help our churches to make the biggest splash possible for the kingdom. The first is we explored over the last day or so, is about the culture. How do we create a culture of faith there? All of us are involved. It isn't just John, but everyone gets to be involved in sharing the Christian faith. And I've obviously done this little booklet, I think some of you have seen it already, and looking at how we create a culture of faith sharing with the local church. The idea of praying regularly, people, the idea of the prompt, the questions each week. There are 20 more questions coming for you next week, so you can keep going forwards on that. But the idea of how can each of us be involved, how can we shape the culture of the church so that everyone begins to share their faith more regularly. I was actually on the way before I came on Friday. I had a filling. I hate having fillings done. And lying back in the chair as the kind of dentist is doing his stuff, and he starts asking about my faith. I'm like, you've got both your hands in my mouth. It's a really inopportune moment. There's a cultural thing of saying, actually, this is an opportunity now to talk about faith. So I actually talked to him about, he's talking about being an atheist, so actually it's a lot of faith to be an atheist. He said, oh, really? And we had a great kind of conversation with him. So in the everyday, there are moments we get to drop in things about faith and about Jesus in the everyday. So that's kind of the cultural side of things. The second side of things is looking at what we call the scaffolding. So anyone use scaffolding in their house at all? It's not in the house, but outside the house, inside the house, or something quite wrong. But the idea is you can't move it around the outside when you're doing different things. So if you want to fix maybe the roof or some guttering, you set up scaffolding and you move it around the house and use it at different points. The idea of scaffolding is actually the church does different things in the community, different events and programs. But how do you use these effectively to help people on a journey of faith? Again, it isn't about being forceful, but about giving people the next step on the journey. Last summer I was with my kids and we came from one of those kind of stepping stones across a river. And I was fine, my eldest was fine, but my youngest was quite scared. So I had to carry my youngest over these stepping stones, very aware that if I fall, we're both going to get quite wet and quite hurt, but it was okay in the end. But how do we create stepping stones for people on that journey of faith? So this is the 5 Ps, which I think you've all kind of looked at, most of you. If you haven't had a copy yet, there are some more copies here, and I'm going to do a little thing to understand about that as well. If you haven't got one, raise your hand. So next slide down, that's all right. Spacebar. Spacebar's it. Cool. There you go. Just again, those guiding principles of the whole thing. First of all, that we don't have to bring God to situations or bring God to places. God is already at work. And it's been great working with the leadership team, looking at what God's already doing in and through the church, the connections you've already got, what is already happening. Second thing down is expect faith journeys to take time. There was that amazing story just then, wasn't there, of that guy who had come to faith in the prison. that sometimes while these moments, as we're sharing our faith, and suddenly things click together. But more regularly, it's actually a journey of faith someone goes on over a period of time. I was a young Muslim guy, I was working for a while. It wasn't one moment for him, but it was a gradual journey of connecting with the church, hearing the gospel several times, and eventually making a commitment going forwards. The third thing is this always thinking what's next. I think Marcus covered this yesterday, but having had a great conversation, what is the next part of that person's journey going forwards? How can we help them to connect to the wider church and what it means to be a Christian? Number 4, use events to support friendship evangelism. Over the last kind of 20 or 30 years, it's become a real kind of buzzword, the idea of friendship evangelism. How do we share our faith with our friends? And that's great. But I think in our culture, it's often quite difficult to then challenge a friend, do you want to become a Christian? So I've got some friends I've been journeying with a long time, but and they're good friends. I really love them, and I don't want to then ruin that relationship by kind of saying, right now, do you want to respond to the gospel or not? Now, sometimes I can try and do that, but often it can be awkward. But if there's the right event to come to where they can hear the gospel shared clearly and make a response to that, it can be a way to make that slightly easier in our culture. And number 5 is the committing to discipleship. Actually, we're called to make disciples, not people who say one prayer, and the whole kind of process of the 5 Ps is thinking actually how do we help people go on a journey of faith and become disciples. So before we go any further, quick exercise, is that all right? It's not a physical one, just so you're aware. On page 32 of this booklet, I give 3 scenarios. I'd love to have a go as 3 groups. Is that okay? Thinking about discipleship. So we have this kind of third of the room here. Okay? You've got John. John is a 58-year-old lawyer who still works 60-hour weeks. He's very intellectual. We know
Quite big man.
you know the devil. It's true. Let's talk about that.
Did John and Laura mention together?
Oh, okay, let's have a quick go at one last one here. Sorry, mate. We share material. It's
We need to do the third one.
Let's do the third one. Okay, so everybody together, one big group. Let's do 33-year-old Amir, who grew up as a Muslim in the UAE. He's an entrepreneur and lives with his Muslim uncle, but has been concerned since he started meeting with Christians after a cricket match. He came to a gospel event and wants to know more about what it means to be a Christian. How would you best help him on that journey of discipleship? Page 32, 33-year-old Amir. I'll give you 3.5 minutes to work out the perfect plan to help him become a disciple of Jesus. Go for it. Okay, so any quick feedback or thoughts? How you might help Amit? What will be some of your thoughts or ideas going forwards? Yep.
Getting into an alpha course,
Give me out, of course.
probably a steady next step rather than a thought. It's pretty difficult. You wouldn't go taking perhaps into a life group or something like that. I think that'd be a step too far.
So then Alpha course would be the place to go in a church building or not?
No, not necessarily.
Yeah.
In someone's house, a friend's house.
Could be in a home or even online or somewhere. Yeah, okay, that's good. Yeah.
One-to-one coffee sessions.
One-to-one coffee sessions, why?
Get to know them.
Yeah.
Ground. We were just saying that actually, is there material that could help us do that? You know, we could all pick up, perhaps like a dozen of us could try
Yeah, there
to
is.
do that.
There is. Interesting that one in 900 is a Muslim. But often most churches don't do anything at all to engage with that people group. So yeah. It's a great thing called Mahaba, great network of things happening across London with that. So yeah. Good, yeah.
Well, I will try to match him up with other converted Muslims because he's probably facing problems I don't know anything about. Or just
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, find out that you know some of the journey. Yeah, it's good.
I'm recognising, following on from Delia, Muslims who come to faith, they will get completely rejected by the community in a way that most of us here don't have any comprehension of. And it's a huge responsibility on me if I'm meeting with them.
Yeah.
You know, so I'll be probably going down the route of the suffering of Christ, that rejection he faced. And there's a massive cost to bear that he may have to face into that I don't have to.
Yeah, it's good.
And it's like, not jumping too far ahead before really wrestling with that over a period, getting to know him more. It's great he wants to know the gospel,
Yeah.
so he wants to engage more. You know, there's that openness, but taking it slowly and trying
Be aware of the cost.
to be aware of the cost.
Yeah. So if you do leave the faith, Islamic faith, and obviously lots of various different relationships end up being stopped, doesn't it?
And are we, as a church, ready to welcome that person with the cost will be to us,
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
be
it's
in
very
the family?
Very good.
And often we're not.
Yeah.
Actually, we think we are, but we're really not.
And that's the big thing about all this stuff. Hopefully, even yesterday's scenario is that often we think, oh, great, plug in discipleship, they'll just come to our church, job done. But actually, it's how do we really want to journey people on that faith journey? And if we're not willing to make that journey with them initially, and doing the whole thing in the first place is not really worthwhile. We should be willing to say we're going to actually come alongside, welcome to part of our community, and do things different to really help them on that faith journey going forward. So yeah, really helpful. Yeah, good stuff. So next slide down, I think we covered yesterday the stuff again about the snakes and ladders, and Mark's going to talk to you through the whole process. My bid for this as a church, looking at some of the gaps are going forwards. That's the next couple of slides. And then this is the 5 Ps. And really the 5 Ps helps connect with that snakes and ladders to help work out that journey you go on. Just to kind of go through them again. The first P, you space bar man, was that right? Yep. Got space man. The first one is the plan is actually who is God calling you to reach first. And it isn't about trying to reach everybody, but who has God put on your heart for this time. Often I use the story of Moses in the wilderness at the burning bush. But even this morning, I was listening to Acts on the way down here, and there's that story of Paul in the book of Acts when he has that vision of the Macedonians saying, please come to us. Very clear, direct calling to a certain people group at a certain time. So who is it that God's called you to reach at this time? And it's about working out what you're already doing as well. Number 2, prepare. It's about supporting congregation, that everybody gets to play and be involved in what God's doing. And it's working out how we can get equipped to do that. So again, if you were working with Muslims, how do you really understand perhaps what's going on with them, and how do you best journey with them? What training might you need to have as a congregation to help that going forwards? Number 3 is about the party. It's about a kingdom demonstration, and about showing something of the church. There's a great book by a guy called, I think it's Sam Chan, who talks about if one person said to him, "I saw a UFO last night," he'd be like, "Okay, right, whatever." But if one person said, "I saw a UFO," and then 10 more people also said, "I also saw a UFO," he's suddenly going to think, well, maybe you did see a UFO of some sort. And I think there's something about being a part of the church community, get people to come along and experience the wider church community, is they can see that actually not just you, but a whole bunch of different people from different backgrounds believe this same thing about Jesus. And it suddenly gives the whole thing, oh, this is more than just one person, it's actually a commonly held belief and understanding. It gives it more kind of credibility going forwards. Number 4 is a presentation. It's the gospel with an opportunity to make some kind of response. And it could be a Sunday morning service, and it could be a sermon, or it could be actually a person sharing a testimony after a meal, or it could be a piece of theatre that compellingly shares the gospel message. Number 5 is that plug-in, that discipleship journey, how we can actually disciple that person going forward and help them on that journey. And each of these things are like a stepping stone. So, next slide down, I think it is. For the prepare, you might actually end up having thousands of conversations as a church over the next year with different people in different places. But of those conversations, it might be that actually 100 people come to one of your party events. They come and meet the church, engage in some way, and hear what's going on. From that group, a certain number of them might say, "What made you guys tick? There's something different about you, I want to know what it's about." They come to the present event and they hear what the gospel is all about. On the back of that, some of them, maybe just 10 of them, say, "There's something I've heard today which is so provoking me in some way that I want to go on a journey to understand this more," and that is the plug-in section at the end. Just to give you an example, one of the churches we're working with is over in Staplehurst in Kent, and they've been doing this kind of the 5 Ps with them as well. They really worked out that their planning stage was who is God calling us to reach. They worked out they had about 350 people a month using their building who are not linked to the church, but using their building in some way. They've got a badminton club and a kind of discussion club and a food kind of bank, a whole bunch of different things. And they said, actually, rather than trying to put our net out further, how do we connect more meaningfully with those 350 people? So there was the prepare. How do we help the church begin to have more conversations in the everyday with this group as they're using the building? And as part of that, we then had a party, and the party was a barn dance, because in Staplehurst that's what they do, and it went down very well. And what they did is, rather than just kind of flying the whole town, they encouraged everybody in the church congregation to invite some people who use the building regularly with a personal invitation to say, "Would you like to come to a barn dance?" And the barn dance happened, that was the party, and about 100 people turned up. I think half of them were not part of the church community, but in some way were connected to the building in some way. And they did a whole great thing, their barn dance, and as part of the barn dance they said, "Look, for Christmas time we're going to have a Christmas carol concert," and that was the present, and I got to go and share the gospel message there with them as part of the present event. And again, they had about 87 that happened, to that number. Again, lots of them completely unchurched came along to hear what the Christmas story was all about. On the back of that, 15 people took away a gospel. That was the plug-in to go and read the gospel. And the idea is they were given a pen to mark out anything they didn't understand and to kind of write all over this booklet and then to come back and have a conversation. 3 of them had come back and had a conversation, and 1 guy made some kind of commitment to Christ. So that's the kind of the journey that's gone on in that church over in Staplehurst. Does that make sense? Great. Next slide down. So next slide off that as well. So we've also come up with not only the 5 Ps but the 5 Es, which we found really helpful. Because often I think we can do church events without really thinking the journey people are going through. And these 5 Es have been very helpful for us. There is a new booklet coming, but it's not quite ready yet, on the 5 Es. The first one is the entice. So whenever we're doing something in the community, if we're doing a party or an event of some sort, the entice is why should people come? And how best do we make that invitation? I guess in the 5 Ps booklet I talk about, I've been to 2 scenarios very often. I sometimes get invited to go and do a gospel talk somewhere. And they tell me a year out, "Oh, it's going to be a great event, loads of unchurched people, come and share the gospel at this event." And then when you finally get there, they go, actually everyone here is already a Christian. Can you kind of change your message a bit to make it more for the Christians? Because they actually haven't done the groundwork, first of all, building relationships, hosting parties. And the other example I often have is that we have these parties in the community, but the Christians are so busy running around making sure nobody gets food poisoning from the barbecue and no child gets caught at the bouncy castle, that they're so busy doing things that people come to these parties and they've got no idea actually who's really organising it and why they're doing it. There's no really understanding why. So, first of all, the entice is actually how we're going to have people to come along, then there's the entry. When people come through the door, how do we really welcome them? In fact, even before they come through the door. So that church in Staplehurst had this barn dance, and I said to them, what are you going to do to really welcome people in this entry kind of way? And they began to think about it. And actually their church is quite a long way from the main road, it's quite set back. So rather than welcoming out the door, they put a team in front of the church. Because they want people who are unchurched, who wouldn't feel as comfortable coming to church events, feel really welcome. So they put, because again it's Kent, they had bales of hay at the front and people in cowboy hats and welcomed them into this kind of barn dance. And so they came to the front door. The first thing they would do is give them a drink. Because actually, whenever you go to a party or a social setting, there's something about having a drink in your hand which suddenly makes you feel much more safe because you've got something to protect yourself, something to do. So almost very simple things. The entry, how do we really welcome people into our spaces? The third one down is the engagement, is what's going to happen whilst the event's happening. And we've come up with kind of two little terms there of hosts and super hosts. And the hosts are the idea that there are people who might not particularly like barn dancing, who are from the church, think, well actually, I don't like barn dancing, I prefer sitting still. But they said, no, come along anyway, we want you to be part of the host team. And in the same way that if I was hosting a party at my house, I would be a host, that actually if the church is hosting a party, we need to involve other people who are part of the congregation to see themselves almost as like being hosts in their own homes. This is our space, how we're going to host it well. The idea of hosts is the idea of super hosts. So there's somebody who will really begin to communicate at the party why we're doing what we're doing and what the next present thing could be. So the idea of a super host is somebody who can articulate why they're doing what they're doing. So it was Clive in Staplehurst, and what he didn't do at the barn dance is get up and give a 15-minute sermon, because people had come to a dance, not to a talk. But as part of it, he said, look, just so you're aware, this event today has been organised by this congregation here because we really believe powerfully in the importance of community. And we really believe that God loves you and God loves us, and we want to bless you with this barn dance. If you want to know more about what makes us tick, then we've got this Christmas Carol concert happening next month, and we'd love to invite you. That was one of the super hosts to really make that next connection going forwards. But there's the exit, that as people leave, they feel like they've, whenever you go to an event, your initial thing about going into an event and how you leave an event, those kind of two moments are quite critical in your overall perception of how an event has been. So if you went to, I don't know, a theatre and the show was really good, but actually getting out was a complete nightmare at the end and you couldn't get out of the building and got lost in a maze or something, you get, well actually it wasn't that great an event because the exit had been really bad. So how do we leave really well? How do we say goodbye really well? And then the final one is the extend, is actually what is the next thing on that person's journey going forwards? And it links into those 5 Ps. What is the next step? So making it very clear, what do you want to do next? And I think we can just expect people to know what to do, but I think we have to make it really clear as what the next step of the journey is. So giving away those Gospels in the Staplehurst church, what I forgot to do was put in an email address and contact details so you'd actually call somebody or message somebody about reading the Gospel. So it had to then be a relational follow-up rather than an email. Those kind of little things make it really clear as what the next step is, are really kind of important. Does that make sense? So you've got the 5 Ps and you've got the 5 Es. Yeah? Next slide down there, is that all of them? Great. So what I have done, I have a bit of a kind of drum roll for this. That was a rubbish drum roll. I've been trying to get from my head what this can look like as one form. So you've now got the 5 Ps and 5 Es planning tool. And this is the first time it's ever been used. So if it goes badly, blame Marcus. And So what I thought we'd do actually is have a go at filling this in together as a group, as in 3 different groups perhaps. That first thing about a plan, I think there are 3 kind of groups we began to look at, 2 very clear ones and perhaps one third group. The first group, I think, is as a church, what God's already doing is that many of you are in the early retirement age, is that there's naturally connections there already with people in the community, and you're already journeying people in the community. And thinking about actually, well, if that's one of our groups, how do we begin to plan from there going forward? The second group, I think, is about families. Something about families, young kids. How do we help journey with those groups of people who are actually on that journey going forwards around faith? And what do we put in the stepping stones? So already doing things like who let their dads out, and things like the church section on Sunday afternoon sometimes. There's things happening already. How do you really become more intentional about giving people the opportunity to go forwards? And then the third group is probably around kind of young adults, wasn't it? Which is kind of emerging as a kind of thing. I think over the last few years as a church we've been thinking about the kind of 25 to 40 age bracket. It's often a lot of taking to now. How do we journey with them going forwards? And we have, I think, a list here of all the events you've got planned already. So can we have a go at filling in this form? Is that okay? Some of you are like, yeah. Some of you are like, what? Administration on Sunday morning? What is this about? So should we have 3 groups? So should we have an early retirement kind of group? Should we have a kind of family group? And perhaps another group for those who are looking more young adults? Does that work? Yeah? So, should we go for early retirement people over here? Look, you haven't got to be early retired to be there, but if you want to be involved in if you want to be involved in kind of think through the family stuff in the middle area here, if you want to be talking about young adults over here, is that right? So 3 groups. Is that right? And then what we'll do, should we have, who wants to oversee a group? Someone want to John, do you want to have a conversation? Is that right?
We're very enthusiastic about this area, and we are very enthusiastic about the need. Anybody put the names yeah, but is there going to be the...
So hopefully by now you've fully finished that table. It's all done. You frame it now on the wall. We're coming towards 11 o'clock, so...
They do like to finish their thoughts.
Just be more dramatic, Andy.
So when we begin to draw your thoughts or conclusions, and you won't have finished it yet at all, and it probably takes more than 15 minutes, an hour or 2 hours to do this form. But hopefully it begins to see some of that kind of structure, that framework, and what it can look like locally in your church. Because I think often these concepts are, they're fine in a booklet or fine on the screen, but actually hopefully on a piece of planning paper you can begin to work out how things fit together. And what's really important is that this kind of ideas are understood not just by the leadership team but by the whole church. Everyone grasps what's going on and why we're doing what we're doing, and then can think strategically about how we best put things together. I think often at churches, somebody wants to run an event, and the church says, yeah, go and run an event, and they run the event and that's great. There's no real thinking through how do all these things fit together. And if one of our main purposes of the church is to share Jesus, then how to make sure these things are dovetailing together effectively. So you haven't finished that, and that's okay, but hopefully it begins to get the ball rolling, and over the kind of coming weeks, you can look at it again. And the idea is that you wouldn't just do this once, but you should do it every single term. So you continue to work through these 5 Ps at different times of the year with different people groups, so you really are thinking through what it looks like going forwards. Going forwards, we want to be more involved. How do they best do that, John? They best to...
Yes.